Hello, everyone. I'm just letting people come into the Zoom room for our webinar today. I can see quite a few people joining, so let me just give this another few minutes. I'm Anneke van Woudenberg. I'm the Executive Director of RAID. Welcome to those who've joined already. Um, I'll begin just talking about a few housekeeping rules, but I might repeat that a few times. Um, if you don't mind, as kind of people join. So for those who want to do a Q or answer, put any questions into the Q&A, you'll see at the bottom a question mark and a Q&A. So please use that throughout the presentation so that you can ask any questions. We'll definitely get to those at the end. You can also turn on, for those who are used to using this on Zoom, a transcript if you want to read as well as listen to us. And there will be some links that we'll put in the Q&A as well to reports or to the scientific findings. So just letting people join that are coming on now. There's a few more coming. Welcome, everyone. Okay, I see a few more people coming in. Okay, one more repetition of the housekeeping for everyone. And then we'll get started. So if you want to do a question, click on the Q&A button. If you want transcripts, you can do so by clicking on the three dots and then going to show captions. And just to remind everyone that this is a recorded session. So should you wish to ask a question, that will also turn up in the recording. All right, I'm going to kick us off. So I'm Anneke van Woudenberg. I'm the Executive Director of RAID, and I'm very delighted to be joined by two wonderful colleagues from Source International, Flaviano Bianchini and Rachele Ossola, if I got that right. I'm going to just kick us off by doing a few bits about context and about who we are. But of course, we're mostly all here to listen to some of the fantastic scientific findings that we've been collecting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I will just share my screen and get moving on that. Reminder to everyone that it's being recorded, Q&A at the bottom. All right, so kicking us off, let me just get my presentation up and I will get us started. Excellent. So I'm just going to ask for a nod from Flaviano that he can see this. Great. Okay. So our discussion today is really to talk about the human rights and environmental harms at DRC's copper and cobalt mines, and looking at issues in relation to industrial mining. There are, of course, significant issues with artisanal mining, but that's not what we're going to be covering today. We are largely going to be looking at industrial mining. For those of you who may not know, I just want to situate where we are in the DRC. This is towards the southern border in the DRC. So that red area is the Copper-Cobalt belt. Kolwezi, which you'll see just to the left of the belt, is really the heartland of the Copper-Cobalt belt, Lubumbashi being one of the key major cities in the area. And most of what we're going to be talking about today is around Kolwezi and an area between Kolwezi and Lubumbashi. I think many people will know that Congo is, of course, the world's largest producer of cobalt and a significant producer of copper. And really, we have seen over the past, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, an explosion of mining and extractives in cobalt and copper in this copper-cobalt belt. And it is, in essence, the kind of Saudi Arabia of cobalt. It is really the most predominant area where cobalt is sourced from. A few other bits that are helpful as we talk through the scientific findings, but just for context, Electric vehicles do make up the vast proportion of the demand for cobalt, going into the lithium-ion batteries that are the rechargeable batteries in electric vehicles. A growing sector now is in grid storage. So you'll see this near the top. There, it's listed as 5%, but that is definitely a growing sector for both cobalt and copper. And just to give everyone a sense of how much cobalt might be in any of the devices you use, not least the laptop computers or other computers you may be using to be watching this webinar, you'll see at the bottom there, a smartphone has roughly around 8 grams. An electric vehicle has 10 kgs of cobalt. So a significant, which is in part why we're seeing such an explosion of cobalt mining. What I don't have here, but what I do just want to mention is copper is the other growing feature in the mining sector in the DRC. In Congo, cobalt and copper are mined together, and copper is predominantly in demand for copper wiring. AI data centers in particular is driving a significant demand in the requirements for copper. As I said, we're looking largely in our research on industrial mining. And whereas in the past, people may have seen figures that artisanal mining accounted for a significant proportion of the exports for DRC, that has been significantly reducing over the past few years. Industrial mining is the largest exporter of cobalt from the DRC, and it accounts for about 88% of exports, if not slightly higher. It's always hard to get artisanal figures, but it is the vast majority of the mining, and the cobalt that is coming out, ending up in electric vehicles, will be from industrial mining. And you can see in the background there, one of the stockpiles. So look closely at this picture because we'll be talking about this more as we get into the science. This is a map of Kolwezi. So to the right of your screen, you can see the kind of yellow grid marks of the city of Kolwezi. And then you'll see the kind of square outlines of the various different mining concessions. And you can see from this map just how close much of the mining activity is to the residential areas. In fact, in many locations, the mining wraps around residential areas. And of course, because this is a place where mining is expanding, the city is also expanding as it expands with people who are migrating to the area, looking for jobs or economic opportunities. The other thing to note from this map is all of the red exclamation marks. These are areas where in the research that RAID and our partner in DRC, Afrewatch, did, these are areas where local communities are reporting environmental pollution incidents, or where mining companies themselves have reported pollution incidents in their reporting. Let me see if I can play this video. Hopefully I can. And it gives you kind of a sense of the story that we're seeing.
Is our energy transition really green and sustainable? Here's the irony. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, where critical minerals are being mined to meet global net zero targets, thousands of lives are being shattered by toxic pollution seeping into water sources and the environment. We investigated its impacts. We spoke to 144 people living around the world's largest copper and cobalt mines. We consulted scientists and medical experts and analyzed corporate documents. What we found is deeply disturbing. Dozens of scientific studies clearly show that the local rivers, streams, and lakes are contaminated, and that companies are fully aware of the problem. In fact, they've recorded it in their own environmental assessments, but they're not doing enough to stop it, and the pollution comes with a heavy price. 56% of people told us women are suffering from reproductive health problems, including regular miscarriages, and that young girls are reporting disruptions to their periods. 72% said they are suffering from skin diseases, including itching and rashes. And it's not only personal health that's been affected. Nearly everyone said there are fewer fish and that crops have dramatically declined. The result has been lower income, with many families now unable to afford basic school fees or medicine. Although companies have built water wells, there are not nearly enough to tackle the issues. So while we go green in the global north, Congolese people are paying the price. The transition to net zero is essential first, but it should be both fast and fair. Mining companies must clean up their act. Everyone deserves the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment.
Great. Hope that was visible for everyone. Let me just move on to some of the research that's been conducted on the environmental issues and its impact on human health and public health that was conducted by Rights and Accountability and Development, RAID, which I am the executive director of, and our wonderful colleagues at Afrewatch, African Resources Watch, who we also have on the call with us. We had been hearing for many years that there were significant local concerns around both air and water pollution. So a few years ago, we began to look into this and to jointly conduct some of the first research around what local people were reporting as problems emanating from the industrial mines. And what you see in front of you is what are the public health and economic issues that people repeatedly mentioned to us during that research. And there are just a couple I want to point out. First of all, the one that, and this will tie into some of the science we're going to hear a bit more about later, but almost everyone, 99%, reported reduced fish and crop yields. And these included crops such as tomatoes, plantains, aubergine, etc. Crops that people grow locally were significantly being impacted, both, we believe, by the quality of the soil, but also the water being used to water those crops. But that was a significant and consistent finding across all local communities that we spoke to. The other one I want to just point out is the first one, a significant increase in gynecological and reproductive health problems for women and girls. And this came out from both women in the communities, but also from husbands and from the men reporting that these were consistent issues that were being experienced by girls, by women, and particularly lots of reporting from mothers that younger girls, teenage girls, were not having regular menstruation cycles in the way that they remembered having. So a significant increase linked to gynecological and reproductive health. One of the key areas that people constantly raised concerns about was water. And I just want to put up this slide because water is a significant issue in the DRC, and people simply do not have enough access to clean water. And this slide just shows kind of what our reality is in Europe in terms of how much water we have on a regular basis. So water per person per day, 144 in Europe. Basic standards by the World Health Organization are 50. The barest requirements by the World Health Organization in situations of emergency and conflict is 20 liters of water per person per day. And in the DRC, it is far less than that. And I should say in DRC's Copper-Cobalt belt, which is not a conflict zone and should not be considered a humanitarian environment. So we should be, and certainly companies should be playing their role in ensuring that there's at the minimum 50 liters of clean water per person per day. But we are far away from that. And as a result, people are frequently required to use dirty or contaminated water. And you'll hear more from the scientists in a moment about what they found in relation to the water. A lot more information can be found in our various reports that RAID and Afrewatch have documented. So the Road to Ruin, which was a report we specifically did about workers' rights at the industrial mining sites. And then much of what I've just been discussing comes from Beneath the Green, which is a report we did 3 years ago and which has led to the science that we have jointly commissioned with Source International. So do please have a look at those. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And hopefully we'll, if we can, maybe one of my colleagues can put some of the links to those reports in the Q&A. Following our research on these reports, we realized that there was a real need for us to gather our own science and for communities to have access to clear scientific data about two vectors they constantly talked about, water and air. And that's when we began our collaboration with Source International, and they've gone and done substantive research in the DRC Copper-Cobalt belt to have a look at what is going on in terms of the pollution around air pollution and water pollution. One of the reasons we decided it was so important to have Source International come in or to have independent scientific testing is that much of what the companies hold is not being shared with local communities. So as a result, community science is important. It's important for local communities to be aware of what we're finding in terms of air pollution and water pollution and what the public health impacts may be. So let me hand over to Flaviano, who's going to kick us off with what he and his team have found when they conducted research there. Flaviano, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. I will introduce you to Source International and who we are, and then I will pass the voice to my colleague Rachele, who will show you the impact on water, and then be back to me, and I will explain the impact on air. We're Source International. We are an organization composed by mostly scientists, and we work with communities and other organizations affected by environmental crimes all over the world. So exactly like Anneke just said, when there is a community or an organization that needs scientific evidence to claim their rights, they can call us and we can help them in collecting scientific evidence that they can use to stand up for their rights, both in legal action or in advocacy campaign or other type of campaigns. These are all the projects that we have done in 14 years. As you can see, a lot of them are related to mining, but we also work in oil and gas, agriculture, and especially in the last few years on environmental war crime. We have been working, studying the impact of the war on environment, both in Ukraine and in the south of Lebanon. And so, as I said, these are all our projects and our headquarters in Italy, and we also have another small parallel headquarter in the United States. And today we will speak about one of these blue dots, which are the blue pins, which are the mining, and especially this one here, which is exactly the Kolwezi, as we've seen before, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Rachele, you should start about it.
Yes, thanks, Flaviano. I will actually take him from there directly. So yes, I just bring you back right into the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Copper-Cobalt belt we heard about from Anneke. And so this region is extremely rich in minerals, in particular the mineral.
Excuse me, Rachele, we see in presentation mode. Can you use slideshow?
Better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So yes, so we basically, the ore here contains copper and cobalt, of course, as main minerals, but also manganese and uranium. So I'm mentioning this because we are going to talk about these elements quite a bit during the presentation. Again, since last October, we went for our first field campaign and focusing on three main areas. The first is Kolwezi, and today we decided to use this as a case study to present a little bit of our results. But as Anneke mentioned, we also worked in other areas. There is villages around Lake Kando and in Fungurume. And in general, we focus on two environmental media, air and water. Now, if we give a deeper look into Kolwezi, it's really striking seeing from the satellite how humans and economic activities are colliding in this area. And this was even more evident in our study area because it was really at the interface between mines and human settlements. So it was very common when we were taking samples there to drive along a road and having on one side a house of people, on the other side these huge mountains of mining waste. So as I mentioned, our first field campaign focused on water and air. For water in particular, we took a look at aquatic ecosystems, so lakes and rivers in the area, but also on domestic water, so sampling wells and fountains that the population uses for general domestic purposes. And this is what I'm going to focus on now. And then there is a whole part about air, which is what Flaviano is going to tell you about in a minute. So our methods for water sampling were kind of general, pretty straightforward. We used a calibrated field probe to measure general water quality parameters like pH and conductivity. And then we collected samples, water sample and sediment samples in aquatic ecosystems. We did some basic processing in the field, and then we shipped everything to an Italian accredited lab, which measured 22 different metals. And our water quality study was quite unique, also because we were not the only one doing it. During our same deployment time, Professor Kaniki and his team from the University of Lubumbashi did a similar study focusing on pretty much the same things, using comparable methods and in pretty much the same areas. So this was very unique because it allowed us to have a comparison, a direct comparison and validation of our results. And also a little bit before, in February of the previous year, Professor Banza did also a similar study, focus on a little bit wider geographical area, but still very relevant for our findings. So I'm just now going to jump into the results, starting from domestic water quality. And in Kolwezi, in particular in Pierre Mouteba 2, which is really in the area that I showed you in the map, we sampled 3 well waters that the population used for domestic purposes. As you can see in the map, these are really surrounded by industrial processing activities belonging to Comus, which is one of the companies that Anneke mentioned before was in one of these maps. And among these, the one that concerned us the most was this tailing storage dam, which was basically a huge artificial basin used to store acidic water after treatment of metals. And so we were concerned because one of our wells, the closest to this tailing dam, really had several water parameters outside recommended limits by the WHO. And among those, manganese in particular was very concerning because we found concentrations up to 14 times higher than the WHO guidelines for domestic water. This was concerning because manganese is a neurotoxin, so it's quite bad for your brain, especially in children. And most of all, because people were fully unaware of this pollution. So they were using this water as normal for their daily activities. So beside manganese, another parameter that was concerning not only in this well, but also in the other 2, and pretty much in all wells that we sampled, was pH. In fact, we found pH roughly 100 times more acidic than the lower limit that set most international legislation. Now, acidic pH does not pose a direct threat to human health necessarily. In fact, a lot of food that we eat, like coffee or juices, they are also acidic. The problem here is that people use this water for everything. So they're constantly exposed to this water with not normal pH. They use it for personal hygiene, for cooking, for cleaning, for drinking. So definitely this is a red flag that we should keep in mind and hopefully do some follow-up studies, because there is something wrong with this water that they're using. I will now move on onto the aquatic ecosystems. And here we have a kind of a clean take-home message, which is that among these 22 metals that we analyzed, so copper especially, but also cobalt and manganese were really the most concerning that emerged, both in surface water and sediments for their concentrations, but more importantly, also across studies. So when we sat down and tried to analyze the results of this, of Professor Anneke and Professor Banza within a common framework using the same guidelines, the same threshold as references, everything converged to this conclusion. So this really, we were quite happy about this, because it means that it kind of validated our results and gave us more strength to our findings. As before, I'm going to show you a little bit of data from the field. We are in the same area, but now along the Musonoi River, which is the stream that flows in this area and discharges into Lake Gulf. And at a certain point, there is a little stream that emerges from a very big waste rock dump, which is also nearby this mineral processing area. Where, by the way, there were also some artisanal miners. This stream was getting into the Musonoi River and then going into Lake Gulf. Now, this was a quite unique and nice example, because we were also able to take a control sample upstream, which gave us an idea of the regional background, which is not as a regular background. This is a kind of a unique area. So we had this control sample, and then we had downstream 3 other samples that we expected to be impacted. And in terms of results, really the sediment results showed a very clear picture of how the mining activities are impacting the river ecosystem. You can see this an example for copper and manganese, but we observe similar results for cobalt and uranium, for example, and other metals as well. So there are 2 clear things to notice. The first is the dramatic increase in concentration from a controlled site to the downstream impacted sites. And the second is that the control site was constantly below the thresholds that we set, whereas the impacted sites were above. As threshold, we use, since the DRC didn't have values to refer to, we use the international guidelines for the protection of aquatic life for elements that had one of those, or otherwise baseline for unpolluted environments. So the sediments result really showed a clear picture, which was partially seen also in water. With water, things were a little bit more complex. We can have a discussion later on, but this is kind of normal, because water is impacted by day-to-day changes in conditions, the flow rate, whereas sediments are a little bit more stable. But still, the overall trends remain valid. So we observe an increase from the control to the impacted sites. Again, this for copper and manganese, but we observe this also for other metals. And then concentrations increasing and overall generally above these thresholds that we use as our reference point. So in general, these results for aquatic system really tell us something about what the aquatic ecosystem, aquatic life is doing in the area. But still, as Anneke was also mentioning before, here communities really rely on natural resources for their daily needs. So we definitely expect cascading impacts on, first of all, health due to consumption of local food, and particularly I'm thinking about fish and locally grown vegetables. This is obvious hypothesis, but also there is previous literature, previous studies conducted in Lubumbashi and Likasi, which are really close by and have similar situations, showing that this might be a problem. And then there is also a second effect on the local economy. Again, Anneke mentioned this openly before, and I'm happy about it because indeed there is copper and manganese are known to have impact fish behavior and growth. This is what the science tells us, but then communities are lamenting this decrease on fish yields. So of course, we did not have enough data to prove all of these connections, but it was really an important step forward to start connecting the dots between what our scientific study, our results say, what the scientific literature say, and what the community say. With this, I will hand on to Flaviano for our results on air quality.
Thank you very much, Rachele. So yeah, you've seen now where it is Kolwezi. And the first thing I want to tell you is like, imagine when you arrive there. Kolwezi is in the south of Congo, it's in a savanna area. So when you arrive in Kolwezi, the first thing that you notice coming from Lubumbashi or from wherever is the sky. The sky is amazing. It's beautiful blue with its white, clear cloud. If you have been in Africa, you know what I'm talking about. If you have not, first of all, I'm sorry for you. Second, you've probably seen in some documentary or something like that. It's amazing. And as soon as you come closer to Kolwezi, the sky turns completely and change completely aspect. And the sky becomes some sort of gray, milky sky. This is the type of sky you see in Kolwezi. It's all like foggy, milky, all the time. And this is the dust. So this is the dust that is everywhere. Even if you fly, because we came in by car, but I flew out by plane. When you fly, you see the cloud, the ball of dust on top of the city. And so this is our major concern. And I'm talking to you now, I will just bring you deeper into Kolwezi in one specific spot, which is the Galaxy School. You can see here the school with children coming in and out. In this school, there are 1,700 children that studies there every day. The school is basically surrounded on 4 sides by mining facilities. As you can see on the entrance side, there is a stockpile, a huge stockpile of mining waste. On the other side, there is a road, a big road of facilities that basically cut into the cities and connects 2 different parts of the mining facilities. So connect one part of the mine with the other one, and it's just on the side of the school. On the other side, there is the pit. You can see down in the picture the side of the school, and there is the open pit on the other side with the mining facilities. And on the fourth side, there is another road that connects to the pit where trucks are going in and out constantly. In this picture, you can see 4 trucks here in the front, 3 coming towards us, let's say, and 1 going on the other way. But if you go and if you look at the bottom of the picture, on the upper part of your screen, you see more trucks coming. So there are trucks coming all in and out constantly and creating even more dust. This is the school, so with the 4 sides. You can see here is where we placed our instrument to measure the contamination, the PM10, PM2.5, and the composition of the dust. If we go closer, you can see is there's a solar panel that gives the energy to the system, And if you go even closer, up on the right left here, you can see the installment, and this is the instrument. So what we're doing here, we're measuring the particulate matter, PM2.5 and PM10, every minute for more than 24 hours. And then we do the average. And we also, you can see here, there is a small filter up here. This one is a small filter that collect the dust, and then we can analyze the composition of the dust. And I'll explain you later why this is very important. And as you have seen, this is basically the air that children in the school breathe. Actually, this is slightly, as you can see from the previous picture, this one is slightly higher than the children, so it's probably even a bit lower what they breathe, but it is inside their courtyard, inside their school. This is a filter before the collection, and this is after the collection. The filter was supposed to be there for 24 hours, but after 6 to 9 hours, depending from the day, it got clogged because of too much dust. You can also see this is another filter from the same area, another day, how much dust. This is after 7 or 8 hours. And this is basically, this filter simulate a lung. The pump breathes 2.5 liters per minute, which is roughly what you breathe if you're not doing any sport, any activity. And this is a 0.25 micrometer filter that basically filter like your lungs, just to oversimplify. And then the data on so now I'm going to the results of what this filter and the system of PM give us. And this is the first data I want to focus is the PM10 concentration. So the Galaxy School is the number one. So it's not even the most polluted place, but for us it's relevant because there are 1,700 children spending their day there. But check at this point, AK3, which is a house, a normal house, close to the pit. The 45 is the limit set by the WHO. Here we're talking about almost 4 times higher. In the school is more than double. And then if we go to PM2.5, which are smaller particulate matter, so dust that is smaller than 2.5 microgram, and that basically goes directly into the lung, the level of safety by the WHO is 15, and in the school we have 3 times higher, and in the point near the pit is almost 6 times higher. So it's incredibly high numbers. And it seems like because we as human, we tend to normalize things that we know and then be afraid of things that we don't know. So since PM is something that for us is almost something that we know, we speak about PM in the cities, in our cities in Europe, we tend to minimize it, but it's the second cause of death worldwide. Every year there are 700,000 youth, children and teenagers, so people below 18, that died all over the world for the pollution caused by PM. 700,000 just to only under 18-year-old, so only children. 700,000 is like entire Washington, D.C., or Frankfurt, or Leeds, or Palermo, just to give you a magnitude. Only the kids. If we're talking about adult, is 8.1 million every year, like in entire population all over the world. It's like Ireland dying, all Ireland every year. And these are the values that cause that. So, because I've been asking always, like, how is this value compared to us? So if we talk about PM10, these are the average value. In Paris, it's an average of the average. It's very not extremely scientific number because I did the average of the last 10-year average. So obviously every city has points that have more pollution and less, but this is what the city council of those cities give us. So in Paris is 25, in London is 29, Rome and Milan are 25, Beijing, which we know is one of the most polluted cities in the world, Beijing is 55. The galaxy's coolest, as we said, is 105, and near the pit is 178. If we compare to PM 2.5, it's even more striking. This value that we see here, 29 in Beijing, is calculated that caused the death of 50,000 people every year in Beijing. So in Beijing, because they have a 29 microgram per cubic meter of PM 2.5, 50,000 people die every year. And in the School of Galaxies, 44, while 87 near the pit in Kolwezi. And I will give you another number, which is this one. It's overlapped with London because 18 microgram per cubic meter is the concentration of PM 2.5 that was found in the area where Ella Adisokogo lived, and she was certified that she died because of PM 2.5. It's a famous case. She's the first person on Earth that has been certified to die because of the air pollution, and especially because PM 2.5. In the legal case, as reported 18 as the concentration that she was exposed. She was living in the south of London, close to one of the busiest roads in London, so one of the most polluted places in the city. 18 with peaks up to 25, because in the winter of 2013, sorry, it was a very dry and cold winter, so it was slightly higher than the average, but the peaks reached 25. Now, in Galaxy School, it's almost double than that, constantly, every day. What this pollution cause? What is the results of this pollution? And then I go back to this slide, which I've seen before. This is exactly, if we go in literature and we check what the PM pollution cause, is exactly what we see here. Skin and dermatological problem, negative impact on children health, because they are the more exposed, because they have an accelerated metabolism, their body ratio to volume to surface is much bigger, and then increase of genealogical problem for teens and mostly for women, and then obviously the problem to the lung. Now, the typical question, answer or question from the companies is, well, it's not our fault. It's, normally it's the geological background, or it is close to other sources because people burn charcoal or because whatever. Well, so we, as I mentioned before, we had the filters, and we were able to analyze the composition of that dust. And the composition, I will spend very little on this slide because it's a bit complicated, but the composition, what basically said, is that in the composition of that dust, there is cobalt and copper and manganese and iron in a concentration factor that are exactly comparable with the local ore. So basically, I oversimplified, but I can tell you that this dust come mostly from the local ore. So from the stockpiles, from the open pit, from the dust produced into the facilities of the mine. So there are not the markers, typical markers of the charcoal or the car traffic or whatever other cause can be. This is definitely dust that came from the mine. Thank you very much. Done.
Thank you so much, Flaviano. Thank you, Rachele. There's a few different questions coming into the chat, so please do put your questions in the Q&A so we can answer as many of those as possible. But before turning to the Q&A, I wonder if we might just have a quick word from our colleague, Emmanuel Umpula from Afrewatch as well. Emmanuel, if you want to come on screen, that'd be great. Maybe just before turning over to you, Emmanuel, just to remind everyone that when we began to do this research, we absolutely asked the companies for their responses to this and also their findings on environmental monitoring, dust monitoring, and water monitoring. And we had very little results of that. But Emmanuel, maybe you want to say just a word about that and also a word about Afrewatch's research in relation to this. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anneke. Normally, I should not talk after this shocking presentation, but I'm happy because it has been a long journey together to get to this point, and because we've been spending I don't know how much time on this work, and so I can say thank you so much to Red, but also to our partners, SUS International and the University of Lubumbashi for this support, to reach to this point where we have evidence from Kolwezi. I mean, this situation in Kolwezi is similar to other city in Congo, notably in the Katanga region, Lubumbashi, Kipushi, and other cities. I think we have the same similar situation, and this bring up the question of the role of the state to protect communities living around, but also the enforcement or the implementation of the Congolese mining law. And as Congolese organization, we've been asking the state to release those monitoring reports, for instance, to publish the environmental impact assessment study. I think with these results of scientific the results we have now, I think we have many reasons to request to the states, one, the implementation of the Congolese law, but more transparency in this question, because people are facing a huge negative impact on their life. So that's what I can say. This is the beginning of our journey in terms of advocacy, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. There are a number of different questions coming in. So Flaviano and Rachele, I'll put some of those to you. Maybe just before we go to that, just one thing for everyone on this webinar to know is we also requested scientific studies from two DRC experts, Professor Kaniki and Professor Banza from the University of Lubumbashi. We've published all of those on our website, so please do go and have a look and you can find them. What's particularly hard-hitting, at least for me, who's not a scientist, is that the science converges. And the work that Rachele and Flaviano have done absolutely converges with the work that Professor Banza and Kaniki have done, and frankly, previous academic research on water, particularly on water, soil, and sediment pollution in the area. So it's both heartening and deeply alarming, I have to say, to be seeing that. So one of the questions, Flaviano, that is coming up in the chat is, what should mining companies be doing? So in order to keep the dust down, what are the kind of actions and tactics they could be using?
Well, some of them are pretty simple and not extremely expensive. So mining company should do it. I mean, they must do it. The first one is isolating the stockpile. So once you have these huge mountains of waste, of rocks that are sometimes waste, sometimes are reused. But anyway, these huge mountains of rocks that we've seen in the picture, those must be isolated from the rest. So either you close it with some tissues, or normally you plant grass and trees on top so that the dust will not come out of these huge mountains. And then spray water on wherever the roads are, where the track paths, and when the explosions are, and on the pit. Actually, in the response that we received from Comus, the mining company, they say that they sprayed water, but we spent 3 weeks there. We never ever saw any truck spraying water in Kolwezi. And even with the image of the drone in the Kumus area in Kolwezi, we never saw a truck spraying water. And actually the results of the dust pollution are basically confirming that there are no mitigation plans into this aspect.
Thanks for that. And in fact, there was another question about that, which I can also help you partially answer. But one of the questions is, are there environmental and social impact assessments that we can see and which are available to local communities? I'll maybe partly answer that, and then Flaviano, Rachele, please add to it. Under Congolese law, these should be public. So any mining operation before it starts exploitation has to have an environmental and social impact assessments. These are then due to, or a meaningful summary is due to be made public and available to anyone who so wishes. Most mining companies have interpreted the law as being that the DRC government should publish those, although the law does not say that specifically. But the DRC government has only published 3 ESIAs on their website, even though there are dozens of mining operations. So largely, these environmental and social impact assessments are not available. A few companies we have, the companies we have approached, some have shared those with us, not very many. And it is part of the problem here. There isn't access to appropriate data. The monitoring that and mitigating measures that should be being taken, it's hard to know if they're doing those because we don't know what they are, because we can't see the plans. And if they are mitigating them appropriately, we can't measure that, again, because we don't have access to those plans. And the annual reporting that companies should be doing is also not publicly available. And it means local communities operate in a vacuum. We don't have the data, we don't have the information. Yet we noticed, and yes, Rachele, please jump in. We do notice companies are monitoring this and are required to monitor it. And maybe, Rachele, Flaviano, you want to say something about what companies are normally or should be required to do and what would be best practice on monitoring dust and water?
Yeah, I was jumping in on this because while we were working on analyzing the data, it was pretty clear that the DRC does not really have general, for example, for air quality standards, which are pretty much present in not every country has it, especially in Africa, is one of many that is lacking those standards. But yes, there was also nothing for aquatic ecosystems. So what we understood is that mining companies generally use standards from South Africa. But then you can decide to use standards from the most convenient standards with the highest limits. There was indeed, we found standards from the mining legislation, but some of them had some strange units that appeared not physically possible. So that unit mistake gives a lot of space for reporting whatever you want. Or anyway, they are referred to inside the mining area where you might have higher concentration for whatever. So these are not standards meant to protect aquatic ecosystems or human health. So this is, is another thing that I wanted to mention.
Flaviano, do you want to jump in or shall I go through a few more of the questions? Okay, so I'll group a couple of questions together so for you to answer. Some of the questions in the chat, have any potential victims been identified? Have any of the local population been subject to medical tests, just for any confirmation on the public health impacts? I'll group a couple together for you. What steps would you be taking next in this research? And what is next really for us all to be looking at? And what engagement with the companies in relation to these scientific results? Then lastly, you catching all these guys? I'll throw one more in, a question from someone. The local environment looks quite dry, so is using water for dust suppression a possibility? Yeah, so medical, dust, engagement with companies and sharing the findings. Flaviano, why don't you go first?
Okay.
4 questions.
So I left you the engaging with the companies that we have done. We have engaged, but Anneke, maybe you can say something more on engaging with the companies. And we had some reply from companies, but again, they never share their data. None of the data was shared. And most of the reply didn't really contest our funding. And as I said, most of the funding on air, they just try to claim to blame someone else. So the local background, burning charcoal, whatever. Which is, I mean, you have seen, I've been working in 50 cases all over the world on the first map. It's pretty common, I would say, the way when you cannot deny the pollution, just blame someone else. But I'll let you say something more. I put together the clinical and next step since the next step, we're going back to Congo soon. We don't know exactly when, but we will travel whenever we can. We want to do more investigation on air pollution, some more details on air pollution, some in the same place that we have measured, like the school, some in others. And something that we would like to do is also do some clinical tests, especially on genetic malformation. We are still looking for funding mostly for this, and also some more small details that we have to adjust, but mostly, I mean, with lack of funding for that, but we are planning to do. So basically the two answers are no, we haven't done clinical tests yet. What next? We would like to do clinical tests. The water, yes, of course, it's a dry area, and using water reduces the amount of water available. But these are mining companies. These companies dig holes that are 700 or 800 meters deep. So they can dig for water pretty deep. It's not a big issue. They should be able to find water deep in the ground. And I mean, obviously, it's a balance. You know, either you have too much dust or you use a lot of water. I'm not saying that digging water 700 meters is great, but it's better than having this amount of dust. So obviously, it is a bit of a balance that you have to work on it. And but that's the only solution for this amount of dust. There is no other solution in that can effectively reduce the amount of dust that is produced by such a big mine.
Let me just add to your answer for those who were asking about our sharing of the information with companies. So before we published any of the scientific studies, we shared it with 3 companies around which the sampling had been done. So you'll see that in our reports, but that was the Comus mine, which is operated by Zinjin Mining, Glencore, which operates the Mutanda mine, also known as the Mumi mine, which was one of the test sites, and then Tenke Fungurume mine, which is operated by CMOC. All those companies had access to the scientific data before we published it and had a chance to respond. And we have had some responses from them, as Flaviano said, which are available on our website so that you can see how they responded and any of the questions they asked. One thing worth noting that I just want to underline that Flaviano has said, and it goes back also to further interactions we've had with the companies a number of years ago, data that is shared by them is often completely aggregated. So we may, for example, get a response that said, over a 12-month period, we noticed that the dust levels on average were fine. And of course, that's, well, I'm not a scientist, Flaviano can respond to that, but that's largely meaningless. So it's not about average over 12 months, because you will have months of those which are the rainy season, and of course months which are dry when it is much, much worse. So, but it is absolutely in our interest that this information is shared with mining companies, that they have access to it, and that they can take note of it and hopefully change practices. I have one other question that's popped up a couple of times in the chat, so I'll put it to you as well, Flaviano, in the last kind of minute or so that we have left, which is who can put influence on the mining companies to bring about change? Do you and Rachele have a view on that briefly?
But well, everyone, basically, the government, companies that use their products, so mostly car manufacturers, and energy transition companies, because you mentioned like the people who, buy this. Every solar panel, every windmill has a battery in it. So storage of electricity, they can influence government, of course. That's the easy answer. So I guess there are a lot of actors involved that can put pressures on companies. And don't forget that, Rachele before mentioned the fact that there is a lack of legislation in the DRC in some case. But I remember 15 years ago to listen to Kofi Annan when he said a company doesn't need a law to know that they don't have to pollute the water of a community. And this is a key aspect that we always have to consider.
Yeah.
It's too easy to blame the fact that there is no law.
Absolutely. And actually, DRC has some strong laws, though they also have some flawed laws. Rachele, do you have anything final you want to add?
I think this concluding statement from Flaviano is a good way to conclude.
Okay.
I think that's exactly the point. Like you can't, like we humans should have some responsibility towards other humans. So if you see you're doing bad, you can't just look at the law and reference values.
Yeah.
You should just look outside your window and see what this is all doing.
Thank you both so much, Rachele, Flaviano, for setting out these amazing and alarming scientific findings. As I've said, these are all fully available in significant detail on Source International's website, on RAID's website. So please do go there and have a read if you want further details. And we'll be continuing to talk more about this, raise these issues with companies, sharing it with local communities. Please do stay engaged and interested. And hopefully we'll be doing a few more webinars like this in the future as we find new scientific findings that might be relevant. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. And see you the next time on a RAID Source International Afrewatch webinar. Thank you and have a great afternoon, morning,
Thank you.
evening, wherever you are.
Thank you very much. Bye.